She walked into our office like a refreshing breeze on a sweltering summer day. It had been a long time since Terry and I had had a case. It was longer still since we had such lovely company. I didn't know it then, but behind that lovely tale lay a trail of trouble as far-reaching as the ferns outside our door. She came over to my desk with fresh tears in her bloodshot eyes. Call me a fool, but I took her case before she started talking.
You have to help me, Detective. It's my husband. I don't know where he is.
As you can imagine, I felt betrayed in the oddest way, and yet strangely hoping we didn't find this husband. Terry had a way with faces. Could tell a stranger his thoughts if he watched him long enough. I knew that if I kept thinking, Terry would chew me out like a dealer with loose sleeves. I replied quickly, but it wasn't enough. I would later learn he knew my thoughts before he even looked. How long has this husband of yours been missing?
A few weeks now. I think he was... Please, can I trust you?
With those pleading eyes, you could trust anyone. Of course, we're here to help. Just tell us everything.
Thank you, Detective. You see, I think my dear was captured by the government.
The government, is it? A good many innocents nearly went to jail for the rest of their lives before I cleared their name. A good many more did, but captured. If your husband has been captured by black ops, I'm afraid there's not much we can do. What is it that he was captured for exactly? She looked nervous, but yet was blushing at the same time. I certainly hoped I wasn't getting into a high-profile love affair.
Well, you see, my husband is... He's not a velociraptor.
There's nothing wrong with that. The world will keep turning with a few less kids in it. Terry over there doesn't mind either. He was married to a triceratops, if you can believe that.
That's not it. He's not a dinosaur.
Cross-species love, not a problem. Love with an animal? Now that put me off. Miss...
Veronica.
Veronica. We can find, missing animals, but, I mean...
Oh, no! No, you've got the wrong idea. Actually, I'm not sure what he is. No one's ever seen anything like him before.
Alien visits and conspiracy theories always put me in a bad way. It's not that I think of them impossible, just improbable. The aliens especially. Like a Sinocularus rolling a boulder uphill. Who would come so far just to do some questionable probing? Sorry, we don't do aliens.
He's not an alien. He was born and raised on our planet, just in the future.
A time traveler. Now that was a new one. I was skeptical, but intrigued. Terry?
That sounds interesting.
Very well. We'll take the case. And that, as they say, that was how it all began. The next day we followed up on a few leads that Veronica gave us. We visited the crime scene where her husband was taken and learned about as much as we had the day before. Something definitely went on here and we could see signs of a struggle. But then again, in these streets it's harder to find an alley without them. We tracked down several witnesses and interviewed them, but not even the pterodactyls had anything to say. Next, we started combing the city near the scene, but we were unable to elicit any new leads. I've made fun of government quality work as much as any man, but this guy seemed to have been swept clean out of existence like dust during spring cleaning. Someone was trying real hard to keep things under wraps. Terry and I called it quits when we saw the sun setting into that palette of exotic oranges. A beautiful sight in this dreary city. We stopped off at a diner for a late dinner and discussed today's work. A few days without leads as usual, so we parted ways ready for the next day. As Terry walked off, I was struck with the urge to visit my favorite bar downtown. The bartender there is an honest guy who will listen to your life story and even mean it when he gives you advice. I've worked with him on a few cases before. Bartenders hear a lot, they say, and none more than Sid. I suppose it makes him the finest if you're looking for my advice. I walked into the bar and found Sid right where he always is. The bar was busier tonight, but there were a few stools open right at the bar. I sat down next to a mean-looking ankylosaur. He had a scar across his left cheek and looked like trouble.
Back again so soon?
So it would seem, Sid. I'll take the whiskey sour.
Sure thing. I take it you need some information.
Why else would I come to a place like this?
The pleasure of my company and a sweet lady named Inebriation. So what is it that you need?
I've got a missing person and a beautiful young wife.
No doubt you are working as hard as you can.
Of course. I am a professional.
Of course you are. Any description for this obstruction?
Apparently it's something you've never seen before. Right out science fiction.
I've got nothing specific on anything that far out of left field. I have heard that someone was abducted in an alley nearby.
That would be the one. The alley was just a few blocks south of here.
I'll see what I can come up with. Do you know who took him?
My client says some government goons took him. The job was cleanly done, too, so I suppose it's possible. However, she didn't seem like she was on the lam. Either that or she's got a lot more moxie than anyone I've ever met. My hunch is some underworld thugs got to him.
I'll ask around and see what I can find out. I won't stick my neck out too deep in this one. Sounds a bit too dangerous for me.
That's what you said about that serial murderer. I'll be expecting good news. Don't let me down. I downed the last of my whiskey and slipped Sid his fee, a small price for his unique services. I left the bar and headed back to the scene. I wanted to have one last look for the night. The lights down this street were in disrepair and I could barely see the back of my tail. It was the kind of darkness just right for an ambush. It was obvious I was being followed. The footsteps couldn't have been any louder. Whoever was following me was either deaf or blatantly overconfident. I suppose a normal man would call me paranoid, but in this line of work, your only choice is to see danger at every turn. I reached the alley unmolested and walked in. I was betting that the man was alone. If I was walking into a trap, I'd be caught worse than if I had walked straight into a tar pit. Fortunately, I managed to step to the side quickly into a small nook. Once the footsteps stopped just inside the alley, I pounced. Taking my foe unaware, I quickly dealt a blow to the neck and he fell onto the pavement unconscious. Looking closer, I noticed the man was the ankylosaur with a scar on his cheek. That was as typical as I can imagine. Terry and I were probably being investigated since we started asking questions. A quick rummage through his clothes and I found his wallet. I found a suspicious ID and an address on it. As good a place as any to check out. I hopped into a phone booth and called Terry. I told him I was going to do some reconnaissance on a building at the far end of town. I also warned him to watch out, that our culprits mean business. I wasn't worried about him, though. Terry, for all his education, filled the team muscle position. A guy his size could take care of himself. I, on the other hand, was well suited to stealth. I put the wallet and ID back in the ankylosaur's pocket. Naturally, I checked the name just in case. It was Alden. Sometimes just knowing a name can save you a lot of trouble. And trouble I was already swimming in. As soon as I arrived at the scene, I knew something was wrong. It was quiet. But it was the kind of quiet that sent chills through your spine and sent kids away crying. I peered into the base from my vantage high up in a fig tree. I was already suspicious when I saw no guards posted at the gates, but when I saw the entire ground abandoned, I knew something was up. There would be no better time to take a look around. The walls were about 6 meters tall, a bit too high to leap over. Fortunately, the groundskeeper had been lax in trimming the foliage around the walls. Far from a star athlete, even I could leap a few meters from a tree. I landed with ease. The grounds were well lit despite the absence of a patrol. I quickly sought the cover of a shady area. From it, I could see through a window across the way. Unlike the building behind me, this one was well lit inside. The coast was clear, so I ran over to the window for a closer look. Inside, I could see a Joholosaurus and perhaps an iguanodon. The Joholosaurus was pacing back and forth and appeared to be engaged in conversation. It waved its hands furiously towards a board. The board had seen better days. Diagrams, perhaps times, and lots of question marks had been scrawled all over. The iguanodon seemed to be holding some small device. I wouldn't have noticed but for the care he showed it. His hands were otherwise no less furious. He also made frequent glances to the side and towards the door the other way. He didn't seem afraid. It seemed much more like he was expecting something, like tiredly waiting for a train and having nothing to do. I shifted a bit to the left and strained to see over some crates in the room. That was when I saw him for the first time. Well, I'll be. The dame was telling the truth. This whole case smelled worse than my week-old laundry. If I hadn't seen a small pink animal inside, I would have fled the scene in an instant. In all my cases, the worst killer is curiosity. Not for the sheer number of murders, but because, like a cat stuck up a tree, the victims do it to themselves. Now, with curiosity knocking on my own door, I knew I was in trouble. But that's the trouble with curiosity. It's an irresistible siren song. I carefully crept along the catwalk I found myself on and closed the distance to the conversation.
For the last time, I am telling you that the prisoner must escape with the device.
Do you not understand how much trouble it was to capture him the first time? We may never succeed again.
We've done everything we can to minimize the chance. We even burned off all the extra time available on this device. No matter what we do, some twist of fate will, nay, must allow the two to be spotted leaping over the southern wall exactly when they did. The more resources we allocate trying to prevent that now will have already been wasted because we didn't allocate them before.
But we have already set off the alarm. That could be the only reason the alarm was set off at all. Why could we not, without knowing details yet, have the formations improved? Perhaps our lackluster efforts now are the only reason they get away, because we've already confirmed our security to be lacking.
You're missing the entire point! Our experiment showed that the universe is self-consistent. No matter how hard you try, you cannot change what it is, even if there is no explanation for how something came to be to begin with. If we want better troop formations in the future, then we can infect that by becoming more competent as such, or by being visited by a successful future and being told how to act.
Then that begs the question of why we did not do that.
There are any number of possible stable timelines, but we do not currently have enough resources to fake enough evidence to ourselves to pull off what you want. Perhaps in a week we could have revised our operating procedure enough to produce a crude attempt. Considering our language lacks the necessary tenses, you cannot expect the rank and file to be anywhere approaching competent after only a few days.
So you're telling me there's nothing we can do, because there's nothing we can do?
Precisely! We shouldn't bother trying beyond securing the information necessary for a future capture. Hence Diagram 8! If we try to defend the prisoner, then we either don't see the thief at all, or some dashing rogue comes charging in and beats us all up. I guess there are other possibilities, but they all more or less end up with a sound thrashing for us.
Your diagrams don't really help.
I guess, well...
Now at the time, I was still pretty skeptical about the whole time travel thing. But if there's anything that can convince me quickly of something, it's my opponents taking it seriously. It also helped having an unidentified species of animal in the same room. An animal I still needed to get out of here in one piece. Fortunately, I was able to follow the confusing conversation I had just heard well enough to understand I had a ticket of safe escape with the prisoner. Well, perhaps not safe. But I would at least not be captured very soon. Considering the Iguanodon's concern, I probably would make a clean getaway. Further, not just the Iguanodon, who seemed to have all the patience and understanding of a child whose parents forgot birthday presents, but even the Jeholosaurus seemed to be anxious and quickly growing impatient. In what was perhaps the quickest thinking of my life, I deduced that time was running out for me to make my appearance and leave by time traveling. The longer I waited, the more pressure I could put on them to not try to investigate me. After waiting long enough for the pair to be concerned enough to actually prepare for my departure, and some more idling for good measure, I concealed my face with my coat and jumped down next to them.
Who the hell are you?
Oh, please. You should know that I know that you know I need to be off on my merry way immediately. That was smooth. Smooth like scotch laced with sand.
The coat wrapped around your head doesn't help. I suppose this is where you tell us that you're perfectly fine destroying the universe, or at least mildly upsetting it, if we don't let you go without investigating you.
Indeed. A universe without me is hardly a universe at all. From the sound of it, there will be a pretty big paradox if I haven't jumped over a wall a while ago.
I don't suppose that we could work out a deal of some sort? You don't want the universe to implode any more than we do.
I do live there. However, you're too untrustworthy from my perspective for your default orders to not be shot on sight, and you don't have the time to convince me otherwise.
Just a peek at your face, pretty please?
I think not. I'm sure you can riddle out why in the wee hours of the night to come when we don't have a deadline to meet.
I'll miss your sweet, lovable time device. Take it and go.
Thank you. Now you. Let's go. I can't say I was surprised to find that my new friend could understand me. He was supposed to be married in the local time period. I tossed the device to him, and we left with all the pomp and ceremony of a pterodactyl laying an egg. I could regale you with the details of my first time-traveling experience, however it lacked any true excitement. Time-traveling itself lacked any sense of tension. A press of a button, and I was back in time 30 or so minutes without so much as a sickening lurch or time vortex. We made it out without much fuss and shook off our pursuers. There's something inspiring about knowing you've already succeeded, and deeply disturbing knowing that if you mess up, the universe is at stake. Although if I had been thinking clearly at the time, I wouldn't have been so confident, since the knowledge of my success came from a rather unreliable source. The only loose end was my former pursuer, Alden, that I knocked out earlier. I had, optimistically, 2 days before his absence would be noticed. Then Terry and I would be hunted down with rather more force than we could handle. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I still had one Montgomery to deal with. I arrived back at the office before dawn. Terry was busy sorting through papers and was appropriately surprised to see me returning with the target of our investigation.
Well, I suppose that would make all my overnight work useless.
There's plenty more to do. We need to bolt. I'm not sure who I stole him from, but they're not very happy about it. Call in the skirt and we'll hand him over.
Sure thing.
20 minutes later, and one office turned inside out from packing, the sultry Veronica showed up.
I hear you found my darling husband. Where is he?
He's in the room just over there. You shall want to skip the town, and probably the country, quickly. A large investigation is most likely underway to find the two of you.
Thank you very much. If there's anything I can do for you, just name it.
I can't count the number of times I've heard that line. Anything will usually get you all the way from Maine to Alexis with all the speeds of a house Nemacalopterus at noon, if you don't feel like walking. However, something about how she said it gave me pause before I reminded myself that her husband was in the adjacent room. No need. You've already paid us well. Go and have your happy reunion. 5 minutes passed and the pair emerged from the room together. The two looked awkward holding hands, but I've seen worse. Terry and his wife especially looked like a pair of fish in a desert.
Thank you again, Detective. You've done so much for my sweet little honey and I.
Do you know where you'll be going? You're in danger so long as you're made in this country.
We decided to head north for now. Monty is not well suited to these hot southern temperatures.
If we ever meet again, I hope it is under better circumstances. And with that, they were gone. Like a tornado, she blew into my life, made a mess of things, and left me without a home, stranded in this city that now wants to eat me alive. But then that's nothing new. It's a cruel life in the big city, and every day, just like the game played by 4 downtrodden men, hearts are broken over and over again.